Welcome to Behind the Fire. My name's Robert Snyder, and today we're going over a simple mushroom soup. I've got a wonderful team down at Fungi Temple that provide me with just the most amazing mushrooms ever. I've got today a little bit of the king oysters and I have a little bit of the regular oysters. The other ingredients is I have a mix of onions that we've gotten from the garden, a little bit of fresh heavy cream, we have a little bit of basil, a little bit of rosemary, I've got some thyme, and I've also got a few pieces of sage. We're not going to use all of these herbs, but I just wanted to give you a nice big demonstration. I also have one bay leaf as well. I like to go very simple on my soups. I just do onion sauteed, a little bit of the mushroom stock that we're going to make off of the stems, and a little bit of salt and a few of the herb stems as well. To start, we have to make our stock. We're going to make this out of the stems of the mushroom. It's really important to fortify the soup with its own ingredients. So we're going to take all the stems, we're going to do a light boil just to create a light mushroom stock. Some of the vegetable stocks out there will contain fennel, carrot, celery. I just want to make a mushroom soup. So I'm going to use mushroom stock in my mushroom soup to make it everything mushroom. That's kind of the trick behind my soup. Now to start this stock, we're going to have to remove the top and the bottom of the onion. Remove the peels, but instead of discarding them, we're going to add them to the stock. So these light onion peels are going to add the onion component to our stock. The only part I try to avoid is the root part. You can cut around it if necessary, but just try to avoid the dirty part of that. Just put it in your compost for the chickens. Oh, those are real. Those are real onions. Now we're going to reserve our soup onions off to the side. So we're going to remove the stems of the mushroom, but then you're just going to give it a nice chop all the way through. You don't really have to dice it, just give it a nice chop. The more surface area you have from the vegetable, the more flavor you're going to get out. Now again, we're going to remove the base of it, and now we're going to chop this into small pieces again and place it in the pot. And we're going to go through our big cluster and see if there's any pieces that we can put in here. So as you can see, I'm just going to trim the bases off of the mushrooms and place it into the stock. Fill the stock pot with water. We're going to put a little bit of salt in this and a few of the herbs. Thyme is my preferred in stock, definitely the most traditional. I have a little bit of fresh basil right here. I'll do like 2 pieces of rosemary. I'll put my bay leaf in there, and I'll put 2 pieces of sage. So the purpose of the stock is to match the flavors of the soup. You don't want different ingredients because it's a mushroom soup. I know there's onions in there, but you gotta have onions. It's kind of the basis of most soup. So we're gonna bring this to a boil. We're gonna strain it, put it off to the side, and then we'll start our soup. Now that our stock is on, we're gonna go ahead and prep our mushrooms. And it's very simple. You can use a knife if that's your preference, but I just kind of like to use my fingers and just tear them apart into equal pieces. If you have small mushrooms, just use them whole. If you have large mushrooms, crack them in half. If you have extremely large mushrooms, break them into 4ths. If you have any larger stems that come up, just place them into the stock. We're also going to cut the onions. You're just going to cut them long ways and then in about 4 pieces depending on the size of your onion. We can pick through the herbs a little bit. So now that we have our onions prepped, we have our mushrooms prepped, and we have our herbs off to the side, we're just waiting for the stock to boil. Okay, so our stock has come to a boil, and we're going to carefully strain the liquid. So we have our stock, our mushrooms, and our onions. We're going to start sauteing the onion. We're going to start with a little bit of an oil blend. We're going to do half olive oil, half sunflower oil. I'm going to go ahead and put the induction burner on 10 because I want a nice hot sear. The pan has to have enough heat to cook the mushrooms as well. So going through the onions to the mushroom takes a lot of heat, so we're going to go full blast. The pan is finally hot. The oil is smoking. Let's go ahead and add the onions. We're gonna stir them throughout the cooking process, and again, we're gonna wanna roast them to a medium roast. Our onions are finally roasted. We got them down to a nice caramelization. So we're gonna go ahead and add a little bit of salt. Now we add the mushrooms. Make sure to not overcrowd your pan. You want to be able to cook everything evenly, and if you have it stuffed and you're not able to turn and rotate everything, you're gonna have very uneven cooking. Now you could add a garlic clove or two at this point when the onions are roasting if you want that garlic enhancement of the soup. I'm just keeping this nice plain mushroom soup. And we're gonna saute these until they're nice and tender. Basically, when the inside of the stems start to break down, then we'll add our vegetable stock. We have our herbs. We have a little bit of rosemary we're gonna add, 3 pieces of sage, a little sprig of basil, and a piece of thyme. We're gonna saute it a little bit into the sauce. So we're gonna add the stock to the top of the mushroom. Now we're gonna bring this mixture of onion, mushroom, herbs, and stock to a boil. And also, because we added stock, we add just a pinch of salt. Bring this mixture to a hard boil. All right, we're at a full boil. Now we're gonna add our cream. So we use heavy cream in the recipe today, but you could also substitute coconut cream if you wanted to make it vegan. Easy substitution. Coconut kind of gives it a little bit more sweetness, but if you play with your spices, you can kind of make it like a more Asian style. After we add the heavy cream, we're gonna bring it to a hard boil, and then we're gonna turn it off. Should be about 10 to 15 minutes. And next, we'll need the blender. Now that our mixture has come to a boil, we're gonna add it to the blender. The trick with this is to just grab the mushrooms with a little bit of the liquid. Be sure to grab more mushroom than liquid. Now I'm using a Vitamix today. To me, it's the best blender on the market when it comes to making soups and purees. Yes, they're like $500, but I guarantee you it's worth it. You're not gonna buy a blender every year. So I've got all the ingredients in there. Go to about a half, maybe a little bit over a half, and we're gonna put the lid on it as well. I saved a little bit of liquid in here. In case the soup comes out thick, I have the ability to mess with the viscosity a little bit. So don't add all the liquid in. When you're dealing with recipes, just make sure you're really aware of what's happening. Not so much what's in the book, but what's happening to everything on your table, your plate, your kitchen. Just make sure that you have this observational awareness that things can be manipulated to your advantage. So that's why we saved a little bit of the liquid in case the mushroom soup comes out super thick. I like to put a dry towel over the top just in case steam wants to plume out. Just be careful, it's very, very hot. And you want to start on low every time you use a blender. Start on low and then go higher, just like a car. You don't just go in there and press the gas pedal full metal, do you? That's not how we drive. That's how the blender wants to drive either. So you go from low to start. All right, so first we're gonna check our consistency or viscosity. I can see this soup is a little thick. I'm gonna add the rest of the liquid to the soup and I'm gonna blend it up. I've rinsed out the pot that we were originally cooking the soup in. And now, before we taste anything, before we go through any of the salts and seasonings, we're gonna figure out the consistency first. So there's a really big trick to soup consistency. And what it is you gently add liquid. It can be the mushroom stock left over, which we have. It can be water too if needed. If you don't have any leftover veg stock, then just use water. And basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna add this liquid to our puree in increments to thin it out, so when we lay the ladle down on top of the soup, it's not gonna build up on the surface of the soup as well. So my soup is still just a little thick, so I'm gonna take some of this veg stock, and again, I'm just going to add it to the soup, thinning it out until the liquid is flush on the top. Now we're getting into the seasoning portion of it. We're gonna go over what we're using. We have a little bit of salt, We have some black pepper. We have some hot sauce, whatever you prefer. You can do Tabasco. I use that in restaurants for a long time. It's a great acidity. Plus it's got that malt property that gives it the age. And then we also have Worcestershire. I use these two in a lot of food. I have a lot of chefs and companions within the industry that usually are like, wow, you use this in almost everything, but it brings that balance. It brings that familiarity. I like Tabasco and I like Worcestershire, you know, it's in ketchup and a lot of other stuff. So that's what we're using. So we're gonna go ahead and add a little bit of the Worcestershire. We're gonna add a little bit of our hot sauce, crack or two of black pepper, whatever your preference. It's kind of like a salad. Ooh. And one more pinch of salt. Again, we have not tasted this. Our palate is still a blank canvas when it comes to this soup. Fully mix the soup. And now it's time to taste. Again, we have not tasted. This is the soup. Hopefully it's as close to seasoned as possible. One trick I'll give you. If anybody takes a bite of something, puts it in their mouth and says, oh, it's so great, it's so wonderful, and hasn't swallowed it, they have not tried it. They're lying to you. They don't believe your food is good. They might after they swallow it. But food has to go down, and then the breath has to come up, and that's the full essence of a taste. It is not your tongue, it's not that. It's the full essence of the taste. So after I take my full taste, it needs a little bit of salt. So we're gonna add salt. I'm going to add a little bit of cracked black pepper and give it one more nice stir. And again, you can keep seasoning however you like. Some things will marinate a little bit, like spice can kind of come out later, a few other little malted things, but just make sure to go light. It's just a little tiny balance of the age, the nutrition, everything like that. Final taste. Perfection. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Robert Snyder. This is my mushroom soup, and you're watching Behind the Fire.